Welcome to Think Free with Stephen
And Daniel.
Two brothers breaking down ideas and ways of thinking about this thing we call life. Unlock your mind to explore more than you ever thought possible. Think Free. Let's talk about the wonderful world of Henry Sugar. Did you finish the show?
I did. I am so curious and excited to see, first of all, why you even decided to watch that clip of a video.
Yeah, short story.
Short story. I wanted to do research on who would even put money into that project and what they were trying to achieve by it. So yeah, I did. I finished it. I watched it from beginning to end this morning when I was on the treadmill as well, and I'd already watched a good portion of it before, but I wanted to be real focused and
get it all in one setting.
And have it very recent.
So okay, yes. Good. It's the wonderful story of Henry Sugar, just to be precise on it. It's a movie that just was released on Netflix.
40 minutes long.
Yeah, 40 minutes long on Netflix. You can check it out. And it is a story that was originally written by Roald Dahl, who is famous for lots of kids' books, but especially Matilda. I don't know if you knew that or not. So
I had no idea.
He wrote the Matilda books. So it's a very interesting. It almost feels like they're doing a play.
Yep.
And they constantly break the fourth wall the whole time, or they're talking to the audience, but not. So it's a little trippy how it draws you into the story.
And the backgrounds move like they're sets on a play.
Yeah. So it's unique. And he has 3 others that are up there as well. Some of them are like 17 minutes and shorter. Not nearly as compelling as this one, in my opinion.
You've watched them all?
Yeah, because I was like, I like this one so much. I wonder if the others are as good. And I didn't think so. I thought this was the best.
Okay.
So just to set the premise, starts out with an author, played by an actor, of course, telling the story of how he wrote the story. And so it's many layers of storytelling, which I thought was kind of fun.
Yes.
Yeah. So he starts
somebody telling a story about somebody telling a story about reading a book, who then was about writing down something in a story. Yeah. Crazy.
Exactly. 4 or 5 layers. And then at the end, you find out that the person who's been telling you the story the whole time got the story from the accountant of one of the protagonists in the story, who was only just like a middleman because there were multiple protagonists in the multiple stories.
Yeah.
So I thought all the layers were fun to see it passed down. It also brings up the question for me, which was, is that movie true or is that story true?
Because they alluded to that, or not alluded, but
they did.
Yeah,
they said it pretty
one of the
explicit.
layers was trying to say that it was true.
Exactly. And so I did a little bit of digging on the interwebs and found out that it was partially true, or is based on some of the characters were based on historical figures, to the best of our knowledge, and then some of the characters were made up and presumably extrapolations of those historical characters to make the story more exciting or to give it a whole nother layer. And so what there seems to be historical evidence for is the man that was introduced near the beginning, the older man that had his face all bandaged up in a big ball and was doing these traveling shows where he would go around and have doctors bandage his eyes, and then he would perform all these amazing feats that a person that couldn't see shouldn't be able to do. He would ride a bike, he would climb a tree, he would guess the back of a playing card with almost his entire head bandaged up, so there's literally no way he could use his eyes. There is historical evidence that person existed and did those illusions or did those feats as part of a traveling circus back in the early 1900s. An Indian man.
In England? Because that's where it was set.
I believe so. I believe it was in England. Yeah. His name was Imdad Khan, and he was played by Sir Ben Kingsley in the movie. And his story, which gets back to the original story, is that he learned that skill by going deep into the jungle of India, I believe, and finding a guru who lived in the jungle. And the guru had, through the power of concentration and training his mind over decades, had developed the ability to levitate, to sit in place and raise 12 to 24 inches off the ground. And so Imdad Khan finds this guru. The guru gets mad at him for sneaking up on him, throws a brick at his leg, according to Imdad Khan, because nobody else was there other than him and the guru's not reporting on the story in any shape or form. He's a character in it. It throws a brick at him, and then the guru feels bad because he lost his temper, and so he agrees to give him a secret and tells him if you focus on an object and you can train your mind to do it for more than 3 minutes at a time without interruption, you can do just about anything. You can gain yogic powers. And so Imdad Khan then goes back to civilization and trains himself. Nightly, he focuses on the image of his dead brother, who he loved very much, the person he loved most in the world. And after years and years and years, goes through this discipline then develops this ability to see without his eyes. And he comes across a doctor, now we're moving up a layer in the story, who then interviews him, writes down this story word for word. But before the doctor can get the final secret out of him, Imdad Khan dies in his sleep. And so the doctor writes this fascinating book about Imdad Khan's life and the things he would do and how he found it out from the yogi. And then that book gets lost for decades until it's discovered. Now we're kind of moving up the chain of stories. by Henry Sugar, played by Benedict Cumberbatch. Mm-hmm. Did I get it right?
Cumberbatch or something?
Cumberbatch, yes. And he plays Henry Sugar, who's a wealthy playboy in England in the middle of the 20th century, who stumbles across this book, reads about this now dead Indian yogi who learned this technique from another guru, and thinks, wow, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. So he sets out to discipline his mind in the same way. Doesn't develop the ability to levitate. However, he does develop the ability to eventually see what's on the back of playing cards, goes out to a casino and is able to win because he can tell what the next card is going to be, finds out that's
playing blackjack.
Yep. He feels very disillusioned by how unfulfilling that win is for him, that he doesn't get excited about winning because now it's not a game, it's not a chance, it's cheating. Yeah. What's the fun of it? And then becomes inspired by a policeman to turn it into philanthropy. And so then he ostensibly starts this entire rest of his life where he goes around and takes casinos for as much as he can, changes his identity, moves around every day, sets up a fund in Switzerland with his accountant, and then they fund orphanages and hospitals and do all this humanitarian work. And then supposedly after he dies, Henry Sugar dies, which is not his real name. His accountant then goes to Roald Dahl and tells him the entire story, and that's how we all are hearing about it today. So from what I could tell of a brief scour of the internet, Henry Sugar didn't exist. He was made up by Roald Dahl, although the Indian from the earlier times, Imdad Khan, did exist, although the records about what he did and how he got his powers are tough to verify because it's over 100 years old and record keeping wasn't the same as it is today. So there was no wiki page about him when he was alive, or TikToks of his exploits. It does seem pretty apparent, for as much as we can have any faith in the past, as we talked about before. It's all stories, it's all conjecture, it's all things that we've made up in our minds. So if we're going to say some part of it was true, we could say that Imdad Khan's traveling spectacle was true, and we could say we believe how he got those powers, which we have no way of verifying. We have no way of disproving that either. And then Henry Sugar, being sort of the main protagonist, in the center of the story, he was more of an extrapolation of Roald Dahl's imagination about another way that kind of gift could have played out, since the Indian yogi Imdad Khan, in his story or in any other place, never really did anything beneficial or helpful or philanthropic with his gift. It was just a
traveling circus show. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it very well could have been an illusion. It very well could have been a trick, like we all see magic tricks and we can't figure out how it's done, and we believe it's supernatural, and until we're shown how it's done, it looks magic. It looks mythic. It looks like they've tapped into some power. So what I found compelling about the story was, as I was watching the movie, they seemed to be making it pretty apparent, the way the characters were talking, especially Henry Sugar, that all of the events actually had happened. And so you're going along, like, not based on actual events, but like people were very thorough and wrote this down word for word, and you're just watching basically a documentary of the actual footage or something like that, even though it's not, because of the setting and everything. So then I got to the end of it and I was like, okay, how much of that was true? Was it all true? And then that just gets you down the whole rabbit hole of what is truth. Did it actually have to happen? Can something be true that wasn't factual because it's bigger than fact? That whole discussion. And I also found myself saying there has to be an explanation for the yogic powers that were displayed for seeing without your eyes and for levitating. after the only thing you've done is concentrated for decades on a single object? There has to be some other explanation, because I've been in a religious tradition, where you believed God could do miracles, and God could part the Red Sea, and God could heal people from diseases, and God could raise the dead, and that there is an appeal to an outside non-physical reality that can affect changes and drastic changes that we see in our physical reality. And as I've moved beyond that, I've embraced much more of a materialistic worldview or viewpoint, that there isn't a somebody out there, a God pulling the strings, that can intervene and cause miracles to save me from a car crash, or make sure I don't take a stupid job, or rescue me right before I fall off a cliff, or any of these things. Help heal me from cancer if I get cancer, something like that.
Find your keys.
Help me find my keys, exactly. Yeah. If I pray hard enough, if I somehow get the incantation just correct, will help me find it. And all the other times I don't find my keys, I don't chalk that up to God, because there's another type of bias there that is success bias, I think it's called. So if somebody predicts an outcome to, say, a sporting event or the weather or political races, you tend to only remember the times you got it right, and you just ignore all the times you got it wrong. And so if you focus on that, then you think you're pretty good at this thing.
Yeah.
And so the same thing with praying for God to help you find your keys. You don't really catalog all the times that you prayed and didn't happen, or that it took an extra hour and you were still late to the meeting, but eventually you found them and God helped you find them.
Yeah. So. Well, I've also heard it, an explanation for that is God works in mysterious ways, or he's got a plan that you don't know of too. So that helps.
So the times that he doesn't help you find your keys, there's a greater purpose that you just can't understand.
Yep.
Very convenient. Very convenient. Mm-hmm. So back to the story, Henry Sugar. I found myself perplexed, because the movie was saying it was true, and I didn't know how to reconcile that we live in a materialistic, non-supernatural universe, and people were apparently doing things that were supernatural, seeing without eyes and levitating. So what it did for me is it gave me the chance to say, what if I just don't understand how that can be accomplished right now? I don't have the hardware or the software in my brain, and maybe most of us don't. Maybe science doesn't have it. In the same way that a sudden rainstorm couldn't be explained 200 years ago, or an earthquake 500 years ago, or an eclipse,
or volcano
1,000 years ago, or a volcano erupting couldn't have been explained. And so all that our ancestors had to appeal to was the gods, or magic, or we must have done something to upset them. Bring another virgin. The gods are still angry. The volcano hasn't stopped erupting. Our crops are not growing, so we must have done something to anger the gods, as opposed to understanding meteorological cycles, weather patterns, temperature and humidity and pressure variations, and how they affect the weather and what we can expect. So all those things that we take for granted now, and we would never blame a drought on the gods being mad at us. We might blame it on global warming or some other, factor that we could understand and predict, but we're not going to say, I have no idea why that happened. With most of those other things, weather-related, earth-related. I even think about a very popular verse that's used in Christian circles to appeal to a moral resurgence or a revival of sorts, which is in 2 Chronicles 7:14, and it states in English, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will heal from heaven, forgive those sins, and heal their land. Does that sound familiar? Have you heard that verse?
I have. I could never quote that, though.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Thanks. Heard it enough. Yeah. And so the interpretation or the application that modern Christians make to that is heal our land means, we've got too much sin, we've got too much corruption, we've got too much immorality, too many people doing things that don't line up with our biblical worldview. So we need to do steps A, B, and C. And if we do, then God will get the wrong politicians out of office. He'll close down the establishments that are doing things we don't agree with. People will stop getting divorced. Children will obey their parents. All the supposed values of Christian culture, subculture, will eventually be enacted. And I find that a very disrespectful reading of that passage, because the land needed healing. The actual literal land needed healing for the Israelites. They needed crops to grow. They needed the rain to come. They needed the soil to produce grain or corn or whatever it is they were planting so that they could live. And someone claiming to be God or speaking on behalf of God said, oh, here's what you're doing wrong. You need to repent from your ways, turn to me, and if you do, then I will heal your land and you'll have crops again. The need for the people that were originally hearing this wasn't for a moral subculture to take over the degradation of sin that they were experiencing. They needed crops. And so that was the central concern and the central theme of that verse. And I just think it's disrespectful to try to apply that to some sort of moral or ethical utopia that people in a certain spectrum of belief want to see happen. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that Bible verse is ever going to apply to, well, let's just say, a moral revival. Mm-hmm. So that brings me back to my original statement about my own conviction that people can't see without their eyes and people can't levitate. There's always got to be a trick. Well, what if I am saying the same thing that people did centuries ago, that the only explanation for earthquakes or tsunamis or crops not growing is because the gods are mad at us? And what if I just don't have enough understanding about how the universe actually works, whether it's quantum mechanics or some discipline or study that we haven't even discovered or don't know that we don't know yet? And could it be that in 1,000 years from now, our children's children will say, well, yeah, it totally makes sense. And we don't need a god or mystics or yogis or anything else to explain how you can see without seeing. It's just understandable scientifically and otherwise, just like we can say that about weather phenomena right now, which was a bit of a humbling realization to have, that we don't have it figured out, that there still could be plenty of stuff that we don't know about. And it looks like magic to us now, and that's the only explanation we have, which somebody smarter than me has said God is just a fill-in for the things that we don't yet understand. And the more that we understand about the natural world, the less we have to appeal to God to explain things. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I think I'm hearing you saying is that whether that story is actually true or not, or people could possibly even see or not without their eyes, isn't really the point. That just helped open your mind to the idea of things that you just don't understand right now. It doesn't mean A or B or something. It could be that we just don't know how the universe works.
Yeah, exactly. It gave me another option besides the binary that I was operating in, which is, because I can't explain how you could see without your eyes, because I don't know how that would happen. Therefore, it has to be a trick. There has to, or it's just a made up story, or none of this actually happened, which is possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying that
and it could be a made up story from a real figure in history, or it could be a made up story by the writer, director, producer of the actual Netflix film. Yeah, right.
Somebody along the way could have made it up.
Yeah,
as is true of what we know about Abraham Lincoln or George Washington or Jesus or Gandhi or anybody else, because nobody can say for certainty that any of these events happened exactly as they're written down, recorded, or passed along for all the reasons we've talked about. Yes. So regardless, it's either made up by somebody along the way, or there's another explanation, just like for a magic trick you see in Vegas that looks like they tore the card in half and put it back together, that there's another explanation. You just don't know what it is. So those were the two things that I was stuck with at the end of the movie, until I gave myself permission to have a third explanation, which is, it's not made up. It's not a trick. It is supernatural in the sense that it supersedes what I know to be the way the natural world works, which I went back in time and was like, well, yeah, that's kind of how it's been all throughout humanity, is we call it supernatural until we understand it. And then we don't call it supernatural anymore. And maybe time travel, maybe multiple dimensions, all those things are on our horizon as humanity that we would now call supernatural if they just appeared, until we finally understood them in a way that it would become normal. It would just be natural.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is there a reaction to you as far as, can a person see without seeing if they develop yogi powers like that? Or do you categorize it as simply too far-fetched to be believable or to be possible? What was your reaction after watching it all?
Man, I was just so confused.
Okay.
I was very intrigued when they were tossing around the idea about, is this story a true story? And even touched my phone, the screen was like, oh, there's still 19 minutes left in this. Okay, where are they going to go with this?
Yeah.
As they're talking about that. So it was definitely just trying to figure out, first of all, why somebody would make it, what was the point of it, and spending, when our goal would be to make money. So what are they trying to do here? And then also trying to watch it because I knew that you had recommended that I watch it for something for us to talk about, wanting to just kind of figure out where your thought process and where your brain was after you had watched it. As far
That's
as
scary.
Well, I know, right? I don't try too hard. But I would say, for me, it would probably be a little bit more of a discussion of specifically around, can that possibly be true, and could that actually happen? Possibly. I think for me, if we're thinking about almost like talking about the bubbles, of like the interconnectedness of all things.
Yeah.
If your worldview looks at it in that way, that we're all connected, we're, the atoms that are in me have been in a million other things,
right.
Since the beginning of time, then you'd almost have to leave that out as a possibility. It also, I think, goes to even some stuff with like biblical Christianity. If that is true, why isn't there any more readings or videos or discussions about this happening in other places and other times for it? When it's not like the volcano erupted only one time and then somebody wrote that story, and then we're now saying, oh, do we think a mountain could explode and have lava come out of the top of it? So then to just see that it continually happens over and over, and then we find the scientific and the meteorology and the whole science behind why that mountain is doing that. So I think probably if you prescribe to the belief that, the interconnectedness of all things, that would make sense, that could probably be something that happens. I'm not inclined to think that it was either a true story or that it's possible. For me, that's the only essence and the only story that I've heard of that actually happening.
Yeah, I understand. It's not as commonplace as volcanoes erupting or droughts or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I could definitely see why he would be part of a road show if he was doing that, because no one would think that was anything that was normal and all of that. So that totally makes sense.
And I've heard of other places, and I think people who are more acquainted with Hindu, Buddhist, Indian culture and gurus, yogic powers, there are plenty of other reports of similar things happening, although not many of them make it into post-Enlightenment Western dialogue, I think, for reasons that we've already been discussing, or our own biases about that can't really happen, and that's just a bunch of woo-boo stuff that people of a pre-developed or pre-scientific world still believe in, or something along those lines. So I've heard a few more stories, not a ton more, of similar types of things, premonitions, just ways that people knew about things that they had no way of knowing about. So I think that'd be a fun thing to dig into a little bit more and see what other examples might be out there.
Well, and absolutely. I think that's a great idea. And I think there's just even still a lot about this world and universe that we don't know. I would love to talk about the pyramids sometime. Even that, like, of just how those were built and what it would have taken and how we would do that nowadays. And so there's definitely still a ton of mystery, even with how much scientific discovery we've had from the last 4,000 years.
That is exactly where my head went to. Thank you for bringing that up, is to think about, there are some mysteries that we just kind of are like, we have no idea.
Yeah.
Like the pyramids, like the Easter Island statues. I even think about how we're still discovering species of fish thousands of feet deep in the darkest parts of the ocean, or there's because I guess I grew up with this. I understand. I think a lot of us did that. Like, the world's kind of conquered. Like, the natural world, we've got to figure it out.
Well, there's still like hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of square acres of the Amazon rainforest that have never seen any human foot touch
as far as we know,
for a long time. Like, there's no video, there's no recordings, like, for a lot. Yeah.
No Google Maps.
Right.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think because of we grew up in that bubble where the known world is known, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about the unknown world. Our space is the final frontier, is Star Trek. So assumed that we'd plumb the depths of the oceans. We know every square inch of the earth. We've discovered every species. We know every bug, everything. And yet I think there's still a lot, even at this 2023, that we don't know about even our own little planet.
Absolutely.
Much less multiple dimensions, time travel, yogic powers, all that. So
yeah, and I think one of the important things for both a healthy discussion, a healthy coexistence of humans, I think the pushing forward of our species as whole is to just constantly be curious.
Yeah,
like
be curious,
asking questions,
embrace the mystery.
Yeah, yeah, not necessarily having to label it as something, especially out of fear-based, which I think, like what we're talking about, sacrificing virgins and things like that to the gods, it's a lot of out of fear-based perspective for that. So yeah, I think a real healthy thing is to realize that we don't know and not necessarily place it on a deity or a special being that did it, and it also has mysterious ways and plans that we just aren't privy to.
Have to figure it out.
Yeah, but just to be curious and ask questions and think and being able to explore different avenues, to explore 12,000 years ago, we have an ice age and we literally lost like technology that we then didn't have for another 12,000 years. I mean, you can't put a piece of paper in between some of the stones on the pyramids. That's how precise they are. Like, and they had bronze tools that were staking this. Like, this is crazy. I think
that's some great material for future discussion. So
I like it.
The movie again is The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar on Netflix. Check it out if you're curious. And we're going to sign off for now. See you next time.
Yeah. Till next time.